Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Bible Study Minute. Today we're taking a look at Ezra chapter 7 and 8. And in these chapters, we're finally introduced to the person whose name this book is after. And what we see here is that Ezra is a priest and scribe who is an expert in the law of the Lord. And we know that someone who's like this is dedicated to God's word. And then we see that he comes on the scene sometime during the reign of Artaxerxes, which comes after the rebuilding of the temple and its rededication. So what we see here is that he's given an opportunity to go from Babylon back to Jerusalem. And the king decrees that any of the Levites and priests that want to return to Jerusalem to worship their Lord, they can do that. And then the king gives them all kinds of material possessions to go to take to the house of the Lord so that they can offer proper sacrifices on behalf of the king, as well as decrees on what is to be done once he gets there. And so the one thing that we see with Ezra is that he is dedicated to God's word. He is dedicated to studying it. He is dedicated to obeying it. And then he's dedicated to teaching it to others, which is the entire reason why he wants to return to Jerusalem, because he wants God's people to know how to obey God's word and God's commands, so that what has happened with their exile to Babylon does not happen again. So that is his mission. And the king even decrees that for people that don't know the word of the Lord and how to obey it, Ezra's job is to teach them that. And then we see on into chapter 8 some of the details about his return to Jerusalem. So we see that it's a trip that takes 4 months, and he is so confident in God that he doesn't even ask the king for army to protect them on their journey. He asks God, he fasts and prays for God's protection on this trip. And even though he's carrying like tons of gold, tons of silver, and just tons of value, that God protects him this entire trip. He doesn't ask for anybody to protect him other than God himself. And we see his trust in God in that, so much so that he refused to ask the king, because he had talked up God and his ability to protect. And so we see him finally getting to Jerusalem, giving all this to the priests there, and then making tons of sacrifices. So the question here is, what's our takeaway from this? Ultimately, it is to look at Ezra in his life, because Ezra is someone who was one, dedicated to studying, obeying, and then teaching others the law of the Lord. And that is the heart of discipleship. That is what we were called to do as believers. We are called to study God's word, then we're called to apply it to our lives and obey it, and then finally we're to teach that to others. And this is exactly what Jesus Christ tells us to do in the Great Commission. When we look at verse 20 of Matthew 28, we see him telling us to teach others all the things that he has commanded us. And that is exactly what Ezra was doing. And that's exactly what we're to do. So we need to be like Ezra, live as disciples who study God's word, live it out, and teach it to others. That is our main takeaway from this. And then just seeing how great the Lord is to orchestrate all this behind the scenes to allow his people to return to him in Jerusalem, and then to worship him, learn how to obey him. And it's just a beautiful picture of God's grace on his people, even as he restores them after a severe hand of discipline. So that's all I have for now. And until next time, grace and peace.